Pandora's Artifact, Part 5, written by Slater TC1. As in any military operation, order was restored out of the midst of a storm. It was done quickly and without complaint. The two unfortunate bodies were bagged up and removed by a couple of soldiers that were at hand. Then, each and every one of us that was there spilled out of the room and simply headed off to their post, even if bloody murder was etched on their face. After a short while, the room was empty. Someone entered and began to mop up the pool of blood off the floor. I was watching their work with fascination as they slowly scrubbed away the remains of the man who had been standing next to me only minutes earlier. It was only at that point that I realized that I had been standing dumbly in the room all that time. I blinked and I looked around. Then I quickly fled that awful place, like all the others had. I began asking around the headquarters, trying to find my place, when someone else found me. There was a tap on my shoulder, and I turned around to see a man in a military uniform. "Congratulations," the man managed to say in a dry, yet sarcastic voice. There wasn't any warmth in his tone. "A job position has just opened up." And with that, he thrust some papers at me, then directed my eyes to one of the pages. "Report here sharp on the senior director's orders." At that department, introductions were brief and cold. I was given a desk and a job to do, and that was that. Picture a photo of one of those old NASA control stations that you see in the history books. This room was larger, albeit deserted. It was from here that everything in this base was really controlled. Nothing got done without headquarters having a say in it. I mean, the entire oxygen filtration system was run from this room. Technically, if you put in a wrong line of code here, we would all end up choking to death. It was from here also that interplanetary messages could be sent. Little waves of particles hurtling through the vacuum of space. Some thought that here lied the answer to our problems, but I knew not to get my hopes up. Space tech had advanced beyond all comprehension since the 21st century. Yet there were barriers which we still hadn't managed to overcome. Let me put it this way. In the old days, a message, say from Earth to Mars, might take 20 minutes. Jump forward some 100 years and nothing has changed. The speed of light has remained the same, and therefore the speed of our communications has as well. The only difference here is the scale. We aren't talking about the distance between Earth and Mars. Oh no. We're measuring distance not in terms of planets, but in whole solar systems. A transmission to the nearest colony would take at least 3 months. But a rescue mission, that would take even longer. I pondered this for a moment. There was a huge likelihood that none of us would ever make it out of here alive. I found my mind drawn back to earlier. How, in an instant, shocked, I had witnessed the bloody gunshot wound erupt from that man, from Kurt's head. The stench of sticky blood had been immediately overwhelming. The memory was so fresh in my mind that it was as if I could almost reach out and touch it. That thought disturbed me. I shook myself and then I set my head down. There was work to do. Hours began to pass. The shadows danced and leered as I worked late into the night. My eyes' reflections stared back at me, red and raw. Something had crossed my mind and I typed. The security camera's feed came up. It was like a reel of horror footage. Everywhere there were corpses or murderers. Yet I couldn't help but look. "Hey there!" A voice startled me. I closed the footage and turned to see a wide-eyed man standing there. What were you just doing?" the man asked. "Work," I replied, emotionlessly. "Right, of course. Anyway, my name's Ryan," he said, thrusting his hand out. It's great to meet you. I heard about what you did. You're a hero, man. He finished cheerfully. I didn't shake his hand. I looked him in the eye and told him simply that I didn't care for introductions, as he'd probably end up either dead or raving mad before long anyway. He went pale, and the look on his face almost made me smile. "Oh, I'll be going then," he said. When he left, I exhaled and returned to the footage, but this time I brought up the scientist quarantine. There stood the artifact. Even now, it made me shudder, with both revulsion and exhilaration. I stared at it for a while. From here, somehow, it looked harmless, and yet I could feel its magnetic attraction. I typed again, and what I saw made me gasp. On the screen, I saw myself suddenly materialize from the hallway and slam the door. The stick figure that was me threw his weight against the door, still shaking with adrenaline. And then it happened. As if drawn by some invisible force of nature, I took a step towards the artifact. Next, I stepped forwards again and outstretched my hand. I took one more step, and then, well, I don't know quite how to describe it. When I had touched the artifact, there was a bright flash, like a grenade had gone off, but oddly colorful. I shuddered and shook and then fell backwards limp. I saw my head hit the floor hard, which made me wince even now. And for 40 long minutes, I watched myself laying there with lifeless eyes, until at last they blinked and looked, and I was once again alive. In those moments, my heart had stopped. I was as good as dead. It's an unexplainable experience watching your own death unfold. They claimed that this artifact showed visions of the afterlife, and so I couldn't help but wonder, what had I seen? A little while later, I decided to leave. A few choice words with some soldiers, and I was given food and shown to a bed. Still, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying my death over and over again in my head. Finally, I got up. It was easy work finding out where Ryan slept, although it was harder slipping into his room unnoticed. Standing over him, I coolly took out the knife I had stolen earlier. I pressed the razor blade against his throat. I clamped my hand over his mouth as I did so. He opened his eyes. I saw them flit from confusion to recognition, and finally, to helplessness. When I slit his throat, there was only fear in them, and then nothing as he faded to nothing. I took my hands away. They were shaking violently. I don't know what frightened me more, the look that I recognized in his eyes when he had died, or the realization that I was slowly going insane.